We start now the Gewaldige Tefillah of Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis. So the truth is that Nusach Ashkenaz, which comes from the Gra and others as well, is actually not to say it at the Seder that we're saying it. We're obviously, as I mentioned, going according to Nusach Sfard. And it's interesting enough, in the Goin's writings, Siddur Hagra, he brings down that the Mizmor L'Soida is B'mokim Mizmor Shir. Mizmor Shir in Nusach Ashkenaz is generally right before Baruch Shama, so it's kind of before Pesukah de Zimra. And Nusach Sfard puts it inside Pesukah de Zimra itself. And if you go through the Yesod V'Shorish V'Avoda, which is very, very interesting because, and it's in Shar Gimel, Perek Gimel, he actually davened Nusach Ashkenaz. It was a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon. He davened Ashkenaz, but yet he puts it in the Seder over here because he writes how choshev it is that the Arizal writes to say it at this time. And the Yesod V'Shorish V'Avoda goes through an entire paragraph explaining the gadlus of what we're about to try to delve into. Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis, he writes, the Yesod V'Shorish V'Avoda brings down that Al Pi Mukubalim, namely the Arizal, that there's a tremendous tikkun that goes on in the higher worlds when a person says Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis before Baruch Sha'amar. That's what he says. And even though there are those that say that it's a hemshech of the end of the Bryce of Rabbi Shmuel of Yerotzim Shibana Beis HaMikdash, and therefore we are discussing in Yonei Beis HaMikdash. That's why, for example, in Nusach Ashkenaz they stay right after. But the idea generally is that it's a very, very choshev tefillah. It's a tefillah that carries within it tremendous amount of koyach, and the kavanas that a person is meant to have by B'shar saying it is incredible. Before we go into some of the words, I just want to mention to you an amazing Teferet Shloimeh. The Heilige Teferet Shloimeh says like this. He says that before tefillah, before a person davens, a person is supposed to think about the greatness of the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's the beginning, that's the Hakdama, that's the introduction, that's the Hisbonenus, that's what it's all about. Think about the greatness of Hashem. And in comparison to that, the lowness of us, of the human beings, compared to the greatness of Hashem. A person should also examine his own actions and realize that because he is a person that's so low and so far removed and has done so many averas, so memela we are so far removed and distant from the Rabbeinu Shalom. Now, continues the Teferet Shloimeh, Chazal understood that this thought and this introspection may actually cause a person to become completely overwhelmed, and he'll eventually say, well, who am I to stand in front of the Melech Malchem Lochem and daven and ask for things and mishabeach him when I just realized how great he is and how terribly low I am and all the averas? How am I standing here in front of the Rabbeinu Shalom, davening to him and even having the audacity to ask him for things? So therefore, this sometimes prevents a person's tefillahs from going to Shemaim and being accepted, because the whole purpose of tefillah, as we've mentioned many times, is to come closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom. And when we get despondent and we get like down and depressed, we become distant from Hashem. That's why Chazal specifically instituted Mizmor Shir at the beginning of davening. It's right at the beginning of Pesukah de Zimra. We're about to start Baruch Shama, which we'll get into tomorrow. But over here in Mizmor Shir, we ask the Rabbeinu Shalom to rid us from some of these feelings that paralyze us from davening properly. And I want to point out a couple of things. Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid, Ayomimcha Hashem Kidirisoni, V'lo Samachta Oiva Eli Hashem Elokai. I want to point out a few words. The Yesod V'Shorish V'Avoda points out, Shavati Eilecha V'tirpa'eni. I cried out to you and you healed me. And he gives an idea. He says, imagine whether it applies to yourself, or applies to a member of family, or applies to someone that you know. That Rachmana Litzlan Laleinu Laleichem became very, very sick and got a refuah shalema. Think about the simcha that a person gets from having a refuah shalema. It's an amazing thing. Right? Chazal tell us that you have to make a bracha, Mizmor L'Soida, right? A korban toida. We'll talk about it a bit later on when we get to Mizmor L'Soida. But there are 4 people, Arba, that require haidah, one that got an illness and then become healed. It's an amazing thing. It says just these words. Shavati elecha, I called out to you, I cried out to you. V'tirpa'eni, and you healed me, means we should have tremendous simcha for all the people that were able to do this, that recognize that everything came from the Rabbeinu Shalom. And more than that, I'm going to add myself. He doesn't say this, but I'm going to add that we have the ability to cry out to Hashem, and He listens and He wants to hear us. Hashem Helisa min Sha'ol Nafshi. My neshama was in such a low place, and you lifted me up, you uplifted me, you raised me up from the lower worlds, and you preserved me from the lowest places. That's what we're exclaiming to the Rabbeinu Shalom when we say this. Zamru Lashem Chasida v'hoidu l'zeichei kodshai. Something we say a few times when we mention about Hoidi, the idea of singing to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and we're specifically referring to Chasidov, those people that have a connection to him, that have that, that wonderful Chasidus, that they're interested in getting close to him. The Flimishur Sadin and v'hoidu l'zeichei kodshai ki reka ba'apoi. It's just a moment that the Rabbeinu Shalom Kaviyochel's anger, Chayim b'tzoinoi, that the life comes out from his rotzen be'erev yolin bechi v'laboy kirina v'ani amarti b'shalvi ba'alemot la'olam. Right, I would never fall to Hashem. Those words are so incredibly powerful. Eilecha Hashem ekra. We are being moided to the Rabbeinu Shalom right now, that it is only to you, capital Y, that we turn to. We have no one else to turn to. There is no one else to turn to. Shema Hashem v'chaneini. Rabbeinu Shalom, hear me, give me chain, give me favor. Hashem yoizeli. Hafachti mesafti lemochali betachto saki v'tazveni simcha lamani zamecha kavod v'loidam. Hashem Elokai lo'olam adecha said Yeshod v'shorish v'avoda. The words that we are saying when we say these things are improving the higher worlds, that the Arizal says specifically to mention this tefillah before Baruch Sha'ama, which Baruch Sha'ama we'll talk about tomorrow, which has its own Gavaldik Madrega. But the idea is, and as we said, according to one idea in the Mukubalim, we're specifically saying this in the beginning of Pesukah de Zimra, after we've just done all the Korbanos, and we've spoken about and hopefully learned about and hopefully been Mekayim the mitzvahs of the Korbanos and everything that goes together with that. We're then saying through Rabbeinu Shalom, we only turn to you, we're going to sing to you, we have nothing but you, and then after that we're going to turn Be'ez Hashem tomorrow to Baruch Shama.